boom, we're here. Laura, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you today because what we're going to talk about is so top of mind for me. And as I know it is for many, many design firm owners. But before we dive in, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Laura Tolhoek. I am the founder and principal consultant for Essential HR. We are about 5 years old now and a team of 5, and we work with small businesses to help them support their internal HR operations. So most of the time, unless you have, 50 plus people, you don't have an HR manager on your team. You probably don't even need it. But that's not to say that you don't have people problems. In fact, if you have one person or 2 people on your team, you could have HR situations that need some help with. So we actually help everybody from scaling solopreneurs up to 50 plus people with their internal HR operations, systems, advice, just helping them know having to jump down the Google rabbit hole every time something comes up.
I love that. And for those listening, I recently had Laura and her team help me with some HR situations, like nothing like sticky, like no one's harassing anyone in my office, but that's what I always think of. I don't know if others are thinking that too. And you think like, ooh, HR, like that's like someone slapped someone on the ass or someone called someone a bad word. I always think of that, but really HR is so much more than that, with contracts. And we're going to dive into all that stuff today. And so your team has been really helpful for me because I don't have someone in-house who can do that.
It's even things like, hey, we had to shut down the office and nobody could come in because it was a snowstorm. Do I have to pay them? Or so-and-so has pink eye. Can I send them home? Do I have to pay them? All of these little questions that come up that literally suck our souls out of our minds and make us not focus on the core business. These are the HR questions that we help our clients deal with.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. Actually, a few years ago, a friend of mine who has a different business than me, and she said, oh, we're working with this HR company, and they just sort of help us as we need it. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know that existed. And so for the longest time, I just kind of winged it, and I would use Google or ask my husband, or I had an operations manager who knew a little bit about HR. And so she would help me. And it was like piecemealing things together because I didn't want to really truthfully spend the money on hiring an expert. But as I'm starting to understand and learn from stories from friends, from my own experience, it is well worth the investment because it's going to save you money to have an expert. It's like having a lawyer look over your contract, right?
Yes.
It's going to save you money.
And we like to think of it as a little bit of HR therapy. Oftentimes when you're the business owner, there's things that come up and you might not have a husband or a spouse who might be able to run things by, and you need a little bit of HR therapy. You need to say, I can't believe this is going on with this person. What can I do? And you just need to talk it out with somebody so that you can go the next day with that smile and high road personality to deal with this situation.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Okay. So let's dive into all the things because there's so many things that I feel like this is going to end up being like a two-parter. We might have to have you back because there's so many great topics to talk about. And I know there's a lot of designers out there who don't know what to do. And so they don't do anything at all. So let's talk about when you hire someone. I think a great place to start, and I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but not at length, is this idea behind having someone on contract or an independent contractor versus an employee. Can you walk us through the difference and like who should small designers, not small designers, we're not little people, who should, newer interior designers hire?
So it really depends, famous last words, right? It depends on what you need them to do. So there is some distinct differences in Ontario specifically, and a lot of the other provinces. The US, it may be a little bit different depending on the state, but in Ontario specifically, there are some distinct outlines of what is a subcontractor and what is an employee. So for example, a subcontractor, you cannot tell a subcontractor how much they're being paid. It is a negotiation. An employee, you can say $18 an hour, but a subcontractor has the ability to negotiate their own wage or their own objective-based take home. Also, a subcontractor has the ability to outsource that as well. So for example, if you hire me as an HR subcontractor, I have the ability to outsource that work to somebody else, should I want to.
Whoa. Okay. What? Stop. Hold the front door. This is brand new information that I know nobody knows because I did not know this. So you're telling me that if I hire an intermediate designer on
Yep.
contract and we negotiate their rate to say, I don't know, I'm making this up, it's $30 an hour, and they are doing CAD drawings, they're doing mood boards, they're doing sourcing, they have the right to hire someone more junior than them
Yeah.
to do the CAD, and then they submit it to me.
Because as a subcontractor, they are able to benefit or negatively affect their profits. As an employee, you can't benefit or negatively affect your wage. But as a subcontractor, if they do it faster, they make more money. If they do it slower, it's going to affect them. So that's one of the big differences between subcontractor and employee.
Oh my
One
God,
of
you
the
just blew my mind. Sorry. I'm like, my brain is like going through all these things. I'm like, well, when I was a subcontractor, that's what I totally should have done. Oh my God, instead of running myself ragged.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
When it
Okay.
comes
Keep
to
going.
when it comes to all of the materials that you need to work with, so tech, phones, computers, programming, a subcontractor is responsible for paying for all of that. An employee is under the company's umbrella to be paid for all of that. So if you have somebody that you're bringing on as a subcontractor, they are responsible for their own equipment, their own subscriptions, their own equipment, all of those pieces to it, their own phone. Another big one is the hours of work. So in specific circumstances, there might be some things that you can put into the contract, but typically if you need somebody to show up from 9 to 4 every day, Monday to Friday at a specific location, that means they're an employee. A subcontractor can set their own hours and can do things in a way that makes sense for them.
Okay. Hold on. Stop again. What? Boop, boop, stop again. This is so funny. It's so, I mean, I know so many people, including myself, who have been treated like employees
Yes.
when we were actually subcontractors and did not get the benefit of being a subcontractor, but then also did not get the
Yeah.
benefit of being an employee. And so that's wrong. But I'm just thinking about the time, because I know a lot of design firm owners here in Toronto anyway, a lot of people hire subcontractors, but they want them to work in their office 9 to 5. Is it
Mhm.
okay if that person, that subcontractor, agrees to that?
So that's a
Or
great, yeah,
is
that's a
that
great
like a
question.
weird, muddy area?
It's a weird, muddy area and it works perfectly till something along the line ticks off that subcontractor. So, say, for example, lack of work, bad performance, you end the contract. And that sub goes back to Ministry of Labor and goes to get EI and realizes I actually fall into the employee category, not the subcontractor category. So please pay me all of my vacation pay. Please pay me for all of my overtime. Please pay me for all of the holidays that I wasn't paid for as a subcontractor. And then you, as the employer, get that fun little letter. And you also need to go back now and pay all the employment taxes that weren't levied to them as a subcontractor. So the risk, you can still do it. Not suggesting it. I'm just saying it still happens all the time. But the risk is if it turns sour and the subcontractor decides they are an employee and they go after you for it, it can be pretty costly.
And my understanding, and this is not fortunately from personal experience, but my understanding is that the Ministry of Labor, at least in Ontario, really does favor the subcontractor or the employee. So
Yes.
this is almost like a little warning, I suppose. I'm not trying to piss people off who are listening,
Yeah.
but it's really important to know what can happen. Like I recently heard a story, someone I know, not a designer, a small business owner who went through a horror after somebody reported and sued and went after them for money that really they were not entitled to, and the
Mhm.
person had done almost everything right, the employer, but ended up still having to pay in the end. And so I think it's really important to understand as a business owner what it really means, because I know what happens with designers is we get kind of, we're like excited, we start our business and we get kind of busy and we're like, oh my God, I can't do all this myself. And I'm the first person to tell designers to hire, like
Yes.
hire out, get people on your team, bring people in who can help you. And so we often just jump right in and we start paying people. I know from experience, I would just like, okay, great. Yep. And you're 5 days a week and I'm paying you. And then before you know it, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like, I don't, first of all, I don't even have a contract. Second of all, we'll talk about that in a minute. Right. I don't really know if I'm violating any labor laws because we're not knowledgeable of those labor laws because that's
Yeah.
not our expertise. And
Yeah.
so I think this is sort of like, heed this warning. If you are going this route, just inform yourself, right? Like learn or have an HR expert come in and say, here's what you need to know, A, B, C, and D. This is so mind-blowing, Laura. I'm like,
the,
oh my
the
God.
way to make sure that you're safeguarding yourself, one of the biggest ways to safeguard yourself is try not to be more than 3/4 time with any of your subcontractors. They need to be getting income from another source. And that is a test of being a subcontractor as well. So once you cross that 80% threshold of where they're getting all of their money from, it becomes more of a dependent contractor. Isn't this fun? Business stuff is so fun. All of these words are so fun.
I remember hearing this a long time ago. Oh, I feel like I don't want to say anybody. I don't want to like throw anyone under the bus. I'm not going to tell all the stories, but like I remember hearing this a long time ago and I was like, oh my gosh, like, so this person should technically be an employee. That person should, I should technically be an employee. But my question then is, what does 3/4 time mean? So in a week.
Yeah. So 4 to 5 days, however long your day is, is what I assume 3/4 time. So 30 out of 40 hours is 3/4 time. So I want to make sure that somebody else is paying them for a piece of that pie as well. So I'll give you an example.
Do they need to have somebody else paying them for that time, or could they just choose not to be paid by you?
It supports you. It just supports your framework saying, no, you're a subcontractor, not a dependent contractor. So I'll give you an example. We're hiring 2 people right now. We're hiring a part-time HR business partner. So that individual is working 20 to 25 hours a week. And we're hiring a recruitment coordinator as a subcontractor. And they're getting a lump sum for each project that they take on. We've defined the objectives and we're negotiating a lump sum for fulfilling those objectives. And it might be 2 in a month, it might be 6 in a month, but it's a lump sum, objective-based
I've never heard of that.
So
like, how could a designer do that? So because we are project-based, right?
Yep.
So say I've got a kitchen reno coming up and I need help. Instead of bringing somebody on 4 days a week indefinitely, I could approach them or they could approach me and say, listen, let's work on a project basis. I'm going to pay you this lump sum for this project. There need to be parameters. And I would imagine there's an end date.
Yep.
Which is hard in
our
business.
Like for us, we say it's 10 virtual interviews. That's is 1 job description, 1 job posting, an interview guide. These are the things that you need to create, and 10 virtual interviews to be conducted. And so there's a way to do it depending on the project. You can even negotiate that per project, but you kind of have a baseline going around. End date, yes, but really it's objective based in terms of its approach. And that saves you, because it saves you from, now let's be honest, it might be harder to find the right person who wants to work under these parameters.
Right.
It's going to be harder for us to find a casual subcontractor doing recruitment, but it's what our business needs. And we're willing to wait for the right person to come along to make sure it happens. And it frees up our payroll because I'm a small business too, right? I get it. Like every 2 weeks, you are hoping for the best. And then, the government comes along and takes their chunk of it as well. And so payroll is tight when you're a small team, and finding ways to make sure that it works for your revenue is also really a great strategy.
So then what would happen in that situation if you've hired, because I've actually done that, not in a lump sum, but I would pay them every 2 weeks, but project basis. I've hired freelance designers, we call them, or subcontractors. And I'd love to understand the distinction between those two in a second. But, and I've had them come on, like, you're coming on to help me with project A. And project A is swinging along. It's not quite finished, but then a new project pops up. I'm like, hey, can you hop in and help with this project? They're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Before you know it, they're helping on 3 or 4 projects, but the original contract was for the first project. Is that bad? Is that good? Is that okay? Like, how do you navigate that situation? Because I can imagine
Yeah.
that happens a lot with
Yeah.
designers.
So it's normal. So that level set, it's normal. Is it going to cover your butt in the case that something goes wrong? Probably not very well, but it is normal. So there's ways to set up a subcontractor agreement that outlines, per project, emails back and forth agreeing to additional work will suffice. What you want
Right.
is that
Okay.
original contract having the details of, for example, how long does this contract last? What are the objectives? What is how are we going to end it? What does that look like? Whether it's an employment contract or a subcontractor agreement, how we get out of this relationship is the most important part of that agreement.
So at that point, would you draft a new contract?
So if you have multiple projects coming in, I would just say, as an addendum to the contract signed on September 5th, 2023, we are adding the scope of work at this amount of work money for this amount of time at this.
Right.
It can be email. Some of these things
Right.
don't have to feel as formal. And
That's
maybe my
good to
lawyer
hear.
friends would disagree with me, but they don't have to be as formal as we think it is. Yes, 100% put the formality into that first one, but the others can be in email, and it just, person replies saying, no problem, got it. Thanks so much.
Okay, so we kind of slipped right into the contract conversation, but before we do go any further there, so I want to just be clear on the distinction between subcontractor, because we talked a lot about that,
Yeah.
and employee.
Yeah.
Is a freelancer the same thing as a subcontractor, just a different term?
Yes.
Okay, good. That helps me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So think of your Upworks, your Fivers, those people, it's a very clear subcontractor relationship. You're throwing out a quote, people are giving you, or an RFP, people are giving you a quote, you pick your person. That's a clear subcontractor relationship. This is very similar, except you just know them. They're in front of you. So the reasons why you'd want to hire an employee, because you're like, wow, subcontractor, it seems like the easier rate. So here's some reasons why you want to hire an employee, because you have control over their time, their wage, and their performance. It is harder to performance manage a subcontractor. It's usually just like, all right, and we're done. The ability for you to control where people are going, when they're supposed to be there, what resources they use, and that they are doing the work is one of the reasons you hire an employee. The advantages as a subcontractor is that payroll is so much easier. There's no hidden costs in employment or in the subcontractor, right? I'm going to pay you $50 an hour. You're getting $50 an hour. If I say to my employee, I'm going to pay you $30 an hour, well, I'm adding on, 6 to 8% employment tax and paying 4 to 6% for their holidays and vacation pay and all of these extra costs, and submitting that to the government on a separate occasion, or the bookkeeper is, or whoever, but there's an extra payments involved in it. So from a administrative capacity, subcontractor is so much easier. So we default there. A lot of companies default there. Unfortunately, it's the risk of, if they are an employee, if they fall under that category, then that's where we kind of get bit in the butt.
Yeah, it's funny because I've vacillated over the years, back and forth, and I have a combination, but I have times where I'm like, no, I want everyone on payroll. It is so much easier because I don't have to think about it. It's not like, oh, did you sign that check? Did you send that e-transfer? I feel like I'm constantly sending people money. And it just comes out automatically the way I have it set up anyways. The payroll service takes it, comes right out automatically, but then it starts to grow, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, my payroll is gigantic. And I panic and I get nervous because every 2 weeks this chunk of money's coming out. Plus then there's vacation pay, plus. And so then I tend to pull the brakes, and I'm like, whoa, nope, not putting anybody else on payroll. I just want people for the hours they work. And so I find that I'm constantly doing this juggle, and maybe that's normal for a small business.
Well, I think you're missing an opportunity of a casual worker or a guaranteed part-time worker. So you don't have to be 0 or 40. It can be, I can be like, you know what, I'm going to bring you on, Rebecca, as a casual employee. I'm going to guarantee you 15 hours a week, but it can go up to 35. And our agreement is that you're available for up to 35 because you're an employee. So it's, again, it's not a great, potentially not a great deal for the other person, but for the right person, they might say, that's great, because you know what? I only wanted to work part-time, and sometimes I can do more. And sometimes I want to go to the pumpkin patch with my kids on a Tuesday afternoon. And I don't want to tell anybody that I'm taking the day off. That can be part of the flexibility that you offer casual employees that someone down the street can't.
Mm.
So there's an opportunity to say, I worked at Lowe's as an HR manager for 7 years, and we hired, I would say, 2/3 of our people as casual. And in the offer, it said, you are not guaranteed any hours, but you can work up to 40 in a week. And I was like, well, we got a lot of people who work 0 to 40 hours.
That's
and these are
wild.
big box retailers, right? People are
Yeah.
signing these contracts as big box retailers. We're small business. We're very unique. We're niche. We're a specific types of, careers and people that we hire. But it's not to say that flexibility isn't coming more and more of a perk and something that people are longing for in their lives as well.
So in that situation, it's not, they're not necessarily getting the same paycheck. They would have to submit their hours
Yes.
or track
Yep.
their hours.
Yep.
And then you pay them for the hours they work. I mean, it's a minimum of 15. Let's say
Doesn't have to
using your
be.
example.
It could be
Using your
2.
example.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Depending on what the contract says. But
Yeah.
then, so you would pay them, but then you are also making all those contributions as a business, right? You also
Yep.
have vacation pay. So you are paying a little bit more in
Yep.
theory than a subcontractor, but you have them on
More
payroll,
control.
more control, and there's more guarantee that they're there working for you,
Yeah.
as opposed to will they be available type of thing.
And I started out, I hired 2 subcontractors. And then from those 2, I actually hired one as my permanent employee. She's with me now 4 years later. God bless her. She's the rock in my business. But I started as subcontracting because I just didn't know. I was like, what are we doing here? Like, what can I get other people to do? I had full control of my business. It was my baby. I was scared to death to let anybody talk to my clients because they were my clients. Nobody could do it like me was
Of
the
course
attitude
not.
when I
Yep.
started.
Nope. We
And
can all
now I was
relate.
like, let me introduce you to Juliet. Nobody can do it like her. Let me introduce you to my team. No, they are better than me on certain things and in certain ways. Like, I fully trust them. And so that I've grown as a business owner in that. So my first 2 hires were subcontractors, and then we started coming on with employees. And the reason is I wanted to have this team, this feel of this team, and we're all working towards the same goal, and we're all on board, and we go for, we are all across the country. So our days out together are virtual spa days. So, you go to your spa in Chatham, you go to your spa in Penticton. That was Christmas last year. So we all
That's
did
a
spa
fun
days
idea.
separately. But I wanted this concept of team. And that is often more found when you have employment relationships than subcontractors. So there's another pro con
I'm
just
like
to mess it up.
nodding. I'm nodding my head because that was
Yeah.
why I wanted it in the first place. That is like, I loved that. Like when I had more people in my studio physically too, doing what I do as a designer, it just felt like we were all on the same team. We were working together towards a common goal, as opposed to, and now I don't have that same feeling. Like I do have a strong team and I'm building a strong team virtually for the coaching business and to help with the podcast. But like, I've got a podcast editor in Seattle. I've got, a podcast coordinator who's in the Greater Toronto area. I have a marketing manager who's in Pennsylvania. Like I have people all over now, and it's tricky. Like I can see exactly what you're saying, because that was part of what I really wanted. I want people to be on payroll. I want everyone to, let's all go for Christmas dinner together. Let's all do things together. Like I'm like a bring people together person, which is why I love this podcast, which is why I'm building out this incredible community for designers, because I naturally just like to bring people together and connect them. And I'm just an includer. So for me, it feels weird and foreign to have people working for me, like I'm using air quotes, on my team that I don't see regularly, physically. That's to me is like, it's the way of the world now, I suppose, but it's a bit of an adjustment for me. So I completely can relate to that.
Yeah, no, my one colleague and I, we were making a concerted effort. She's in about an hour and a half away to meet once a month, because what we can get through in a 6 hour day meeting together versus over Zoom when we meet like daily is incredible. I was like, I make decisions better when I see you face to face. You know,
Totally. I'm the same
I can't
way.
just say, oh,
Totally.
let's just put this in the books for now and think about it later. No, no, when we're together, it's like, all right, let's finalize this.
Yeah. 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 No, I get that. Okay. So we got subcontractor, we've got
Yeah.
employee. So let's talk about contracts. We
Yeah.
started talking about contracts, and this is something that I will be honest, in the early years when I was working with subcontractors, I didn't have contracts.
Yeah.
With employees, I don't even think I had contracts with my first employees. We just put them on payroll. Like I
Mhm.
didn't have that formalized signing of paperwork. And then I had someone tell me at one point, okay, well, if you're hiring a subcontractor, they should be providing the contract and you sign it. And so I was like, oh, okay. So we had a designer do that. And then I recently heard, no, that's not accurate. You, as the business owner, need to supply the contract. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, somebody help me here. How does it
I
work?
I think it depends on the relationship. So for example, if someone's subcontracting our business, essential HR, I give them our contract. If you're subcontracting somebody who does design work for 3 different firms, just freelance, I would say you give them the contract. They might have one that you want to sign. Either way, however the contract works, back and forth, I like to have the control.
Right.
Call it what it is. I like to have the control of what's in that contract. So I want to make sure that if I'm hiring a sub, that it states what I want it to state. And frankly, I want the needle heading in my direction in terms of where the bias lies. So that's something to consider as well. What you don't want is no contract. So when it comes to even subcontractors, it's a little bit more loose with subcontractors, but it can still come to bite you. With employees, this is where you need to make sure that you are setting out the parameters for the relationship. And it's kind of like, as bad as it is to say, it's kind of like a prenup. So nobody goes into a marriage with the idea of like, hey, yeah, let's get this prenup done, because that's not how you want it. Nobody goes into an employment relationship, a new employment relationship, thinking, so if this goes south, how are we going to end
Yeah.
it? But that's exactly what your employment contract is for you. For them, it outlines all kinds of stuff. But what you're saying is if and when this goes south, if it goes south, this is how we're going to end it. And what we want to say as business owners is you are entitled to minimum employment standards. If we want to give them more than that in a termination, perfect, no problem. We have the ability to. But what we don't want is if there's no employment contract, how much they are owed if we decide as a business owner to terminate them is no longer really in our control. So minimum employment standards don't necessarily apply. And so if you have an employee who's been with you for 2.5 years, who you just say, you know what, whatever reason, maybe it's financial, maybe it's performance, whatever myriad, it's termination without cause. We're going to give you 3 weeks notice or pay in lieu of notice, because that's what Ontario ESA told us we had to do. They can take that to a lawyer. And the lawyer is going to say, oh, well, you don't have an employment contract? Well, that means it's common law. And they're going to come up with a number based off of what the lawyer thinks. And then they're going to double it and send you a lawyer's letter to say, this is what this person is owed. So, and that number is based off of how long have they been with you? What's the employment outlook look like for this person? How old are they? Because somebody making 120,000 at 67 years of age doesn't have a great employment outlook versus somebody making 40,000 at 22 years of age. Very different employment outlook. So they might say for a 2.5 year employee, say they're 25 making $50,000. They might say, if there's no employment contract, you're probably owed about 2.5 months worth of common law. But you're going to get a lawyer's letter saying they're asking for 6, and then you have to negotiate it. Then you bring a lawyer in. It's going to cost you, give or take, however much money your lawyer costs you. All that to say, get an employment contract in place so that
Yeah.
negotiation is off the table.
And that's the exact scenario that you just painted, Laura, is the scenario that I heard recently from an entrepreneur that I know, was that exact scenario where there was verbal and then it wasn't working out. And then that disgruntled ex-employee was like, this is how much you owe. And it was ludicrous amount of money. It was like a year's salary, and they had to go to mediation, and the mediator did not favor the employer. And ultimately the lawyer was like, listen, we can keep going. I know the principle is frustrating because the principle of it is like, it's wrong. Why is this person getting something when actually they're not entitled to it? In that particular case, I mean, sometimes people are entitled to it, of course, but the lawyer was like, it's going to cost you this much in our fees. It's not worth it.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what sucks about HR. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things that drive me nuts. It's like, I can't believe that that's allowed. Somebody who works from home, I think it was Air Canada, tripped down their own stairs on their break. They're a remote worker and got WSIB. And I say, me as an employer cannot fix that. I can't set up a situation where you can't trip down your own stairs.
That's awful and unfortunate, but it's not like you're at the place of employment. But I guess these are also like uncharted waters a little bit.
These are
right?
uncharted waters. So there's a lot of HR stuff that really frustrates me. In the same situation is, as an employer, I have one client who somebody had resigned before their bonus was paid out. And he said, no, I'm still entitled to my bonus. And we had all the paperwork. The policy said, no, if you're not here at the time of payout, you don't get it. Well, he'd take it to small claims court. Well, small claims court is employee driven. He doesn't have a lawyer. We had to get a lawyer. There's $5,000 there for the amount of time we put into this. The thing is that the judge pretty much said, take what they're offering you and go. And the guy said, no, I'm going for more. So now we have to go to the next set of court. And at this point, it's like, just give him the money. It's not his. He doesn't deserve it because he left 6 months before it was paid out. But what's it costing employers? It's frustrating.
It's frustrating that there are people like that in the world. I don't know. I know people who've held out staying at a company for the extra 6 months specifically because they knew the bonus was coming, and then they left.
Done it myself.
Right?
I've done it myself. Oh, my bonus came in.
Pain and headache. I mean, I don't know. You don't know what the working conditions are like, but still. Holy moly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's so, I don't know. It's so interesting. I find all of this. And I think what happens with designers when they're starting out, because I know this is me, is like, hearing these stories is so scary. And even this person, the story that I shared, was like, I don't want to hire again. They're like, maybe this isn't for me. I'm maybe not cut out to run a business. And so you start to, there's that self-doubt that like, this is so challenging because it's not your area of expertise and you can't be expected for it to be.
Nope.
And that's where I think bringing in experts or professionals, it's like anything we do. Why do people hire us as interior designers? Because we are the expert. And do they pay a premium? Could they do it themselves? Probably not as well. Probably, we know that, but they could do it. Right. And so it's like thinking that way too, and thinking, okay, like you don't have to do everything yourself in your business.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg either to get that professional help.
It's trying to find the people, right? And I think we had this conversation. You're like, I didn't know people helped people with 3 people as a team of 3 people. And I said, Dad, that's what we do. That's what we love, is helping people feel confident, because what feels complicated, and these stories are complicated and they're annoying, but it's actually quite simple. For us to help you mitigate your risk with an employment contract, it's quite simple to us. We know exactly what to look for. We know what to see in there. In the same sense that, I don't do my own accounting because that to me is not simple. And when my accountant says, hey, do you want to do A, B, and C or C? I said, what do you suggest? Just do it. Don't even get me involved.
That's what I do too. I'm like, why are you asking me this question? I have no idea. Can you advise me, please?
Google ads. Lord knows, I don't know how to set up a proper Google ad to save my life. Here's the button that I push to send the e-transfer to the person who does it for me. That's the extent of the Google ads that I know how to do, because it's not my area of expertise, and nor should it be. Because that's, I think, what we have is too many hats as small business owners, and we're trying to wear them all. Can we figure out marketing? Yeah, a lot of us can. Can we figure out accounting? Probably some of us can, who have the skill for it. But do we need to be doing that? No, we need to be driving sales. We need to be the face of our business, and we need to be managing the team appropriately, not necessarily wearing all the hats and going down, Google, trying to find out what should be in a contract. Well, no, let's not do that. Don't go down Google to find out, what should your policy manual include. Like those are things that are taking your time, wasting your emotional energy. And what it's doing is taking away from sales.
And also when it comes to contracts, I mean, it's not like you need to reinvent the wheel every time. Once you get a solid contract, and that's actually like what I'm actually going to be working with your team to do this for
Yeah.
all my sub trades, or not sub trades, sorry, that makes it sound like they're painters, but my like subcontractors in
Yeah.
my business is, let's get one that then can be, obviously it'll need to be slightly modified based
Yep.
on the skill set and the role and the scope of work. But once you get one and you've got it in place, then you don't need to call your HR person every time you hire necessarily, unless you want to, really
Yeah.
outsource that, which I'm sure is available. But it's about getting it set up so that then you're protected.
Yeah. Same with termination letters. For most people, once they've come to us and said, "Hey, how do we deal with this termination?" You now have everything that we have, and all we can give you is advice, because you got the document, you got the gold, and we just help you through the talking. It's a one-time kind of template that you can
Totally.
use multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, you guys I've already used your services for all of the things that we've talked about. And it's been really beneficial because, yeah, could I Google it and try and find all that information about Ontario employment law myself? Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. And have I used AI for that in the past? Truthfully, yes, I did. There was a
I love
situation
AI.
internally, and I was like, my husband was actually quite clever. He's like, ask ChatGPT
Yep.
if to respond as if they are an Ontario HR consultant or something. And it was
Yeah.
good, but like you still can't fully trust the
100%.
information that, that artificial intelligence is generating. And so that's why it's so helpful to have someone who knows, who also has your best interests. Like I feel
Mhm.
more protected, knowing that I'm doing things by the letter of the law and not just winging it the way I've
Yeah.
done for probably most of my life.
And you know what? Like in HR, there's some things that are black and white. There really are. But as business owners, I understand that we operate a lot in the gray. And finding out, saying, listen, I'm okay with operating in the gray on this, knowing what my risk is. And that's kind of where I see our role is, hey, Rebecca, this is how bad it could get. But as long as you know that, take the risk where you want to take the risk. You might say, I need to terminate this person with 5 years. And we're saying they're probably going to get 5 months if they go to court. And you're like, I'm not paying them 5 months. Cool. Let's do a termination for 5 weeks then, just so you know where your risk might be. You might be paying up to five months. So that's kind of how we operate as HR. We can't tell you how to run your business, but we can suggest to you, like, this is the worst case scenario. What's your risk tolerance?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you guys recently advised me on a situation, which was really helpful. And you gave me a way to handle a situation that I would never have thought of. And you actually were able to give me the terminology and to give me the talking points. And
Yeah.
it was really, I felt so much more confident as a business owner, as a CEO, as an employer, approaching the situation, knowing that, okay, these are the things that I can say, not saying something that I thought was what I should say, maybe, but then
Yeah.
just talking and putting my foot in my mouth and all the jazz. So it is such a benefit. What would you say though to designers right now who are feeling a bit of that pinch financially? Like we are
Yeah.
in already an economic downturn and it's likely going to get worse. And so how can designers, manage that? Like we still have business, right?
Mhm.
We want to maybe raise our rates, but then it's like we don't want to turn away, we don't want to turn off our clients. We want to be able to afford to pay people, but people are expensive.
Mhm.
Like how do we sort of manage that from a hiring standpoint, from a hiring perspective? Like do we have flexibility? Like what are people doing? Are you seeing sort of trends or things that could help small business owners right now?
Yeah. So the good thing is, for employers, is that the recruitment landscape has kind of balanced itself out again. We're now in December. I would say January, probably about March, we started getting that equilibrium. About a year ago, when we would get a recruitment job, I was like, shoot, like it was tough out there. You had to post, you had to call those people as soon as that resume came in, and you had to get them an offer letter and in the door in record time because they were being poached, they were kicking tires, they're window shopping. They'd say they'd show up, they wouldn't show up. There was just this over influx of job opportunities out there for people because we injected so much money into our economy and artificially inflated it, that there was all of these jobs available and not enough people to do it. So recruitment for employers was tough. It was not a fun time to be on the employer side. You were paying $10,000 more for a salary than you wanted to because they could turn around and get it. And people were jumping ship because they had stayed in their job longer because of COVID. You know,
Right.
everything was up in the air. Everybody stayed in the role that they were in longer for security, for stability. And then all of a sudden, things kind of changed. People started looking, and it was like this mass influx of exit entrance through different jobs. That is all kind of calmed down. We're back to this status of, this level of, okay, if I post a job, I know that the 50 people that have applied, they're not all going to have a job next week. There's a little bit more time that we can take as employers to look at people. And the salaries have started to slow down. So for a while there, I remember thinking about a year and a half ago, I was like, I don't know how we continue doing this as small business owners, because we cannot necessarily pay what some of the big guys are paying down the street. I can't compete with some of these salaries with, even the fringe roles that we have, like the customer service or the sales. Like I can't compete with some of these big employers. And then I was reminded of why people work for us and what of some of the core values that we have. One of our core values is flexibility. It's the reason I started the company in the first place, is I wanted flexibility in my work. And who we hire is also looking for that flexibility. So that's not for everybody. And the other piece of it is, we can offer competitive, but we don't need to be leading the market in salaries and benefits. There's other benefits that we have as small businesses. There's the relationship, there's the interesting work that we don't need to be dangling the carrot the same way somebody else does. It's, oh, look at advancement. Not everybody cares about advancement. And we got to know our value as employers and market our value as employers. So I think that's where that pinch starts coming. Could you lose somebody for $10,000 down the street? Probably. Will you lose them for $5,000? Probably not. If you've set up your business in a way that, people are excited to be there and their values align with your values, they're not going to go down the street for $5,000. They might for 10. That's a little harder to give up, but you won't lose somebody over $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And you got to major on your majors.
Yeah, I love hearing you say that, what we have to offer a small business is uniquely our own. And a lot of the times, especially as design firms, it could be your design aesthetic. It could be that somebody wants to work with you because you're like, do ultra modern, sleek design, and that is their jam. Or maybe they're attracted to you as the business owner and designer, as a person. Or maybe they love the idea of where you're located, the type of projects you do. Like there's so many things that are, especially for creatives, I think are more of a draw than money. But I can relate to that pinch. Like earlier this year, I was feeling in my own design business, like, oh my God, salaries are so expensive. And I think I charge pretty high rates as a design firm. I don't think I can charge more right now. And yet it got to a point where, and I'm sure others listening who have a small team can relate, where I felt like something doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like here are these people demanding these high salaries or high hourly wages. And I'm like, I can't be profitable as a business. Like, I don't you're still going to put in the 100 hours you're going to put in, but now I should have charged my client $10,000 more. Well, they're not going to pay that. And so it kind of got topsy-turvy. And I feel like as a result, I had to scale back on some of my hiring. I had to scale back on some of the team growth that I wanted to, because we as designers get projects, we land a great project, but it lasts 18 months, right? These are not like quick turnaround projects. And so it can become really scary as a business owner. You're hiring someone, and then there's that fear of, can I afford them long term. It feels like I can afford them now. And then you end up having to let them go or find somebody else, or you just end up losing money on a project. Like, it's been a really weird year when
Yeah.
it comes to that, at least inside my design firm, because I've really seen that discrepancy behind the difference between how much you need to pay to have help in your business and how much you can charge your clients.
Can we get controversial here? I'm
Sure.
gonna throw out a thought that I've noticed recently, and it could be a little controversial. So feel free to disagree with me. We also have this interesting thing happening with new grads. So we have colleges and universities attracting new grads saying, look at, when you come out with this degree, this is what you should be making in these areas. When you come out with this degree, you're going to be making $50,000, and or average is $80,000. And we have these new grads with these high expectations of salary, because let's be honest, life is really expensive for them too. It's not just
Totally.
expensive for us middle-aged people with families, it's expensive for new grads. But you have these, I mean, I think of my first job that I came out of HR, I was making $13 an hour. And I was like, cool, this is where I get my experience. But now we have these higher expectations, and you have new graduates who flip very quickly from, 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, because they get a little bit of experience and then they go to the next thing.
Yeah.
And whereas we used to be able to use those new grads to give them great experience and use their skills and grow them, now there's this quick turnaround and these high expectations from a salary perspective that they're getting sometimes. And then it gets harder for small businesses to compete as well,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody
100%.
comes out of college at 21 years old and is expecting 55,000 because Indeed told them the average for this is 55,000. Well, it is 5 years down the road. And maybe some of them get 55,000, but this is average. Let's talk about average salaries. And so you're competing with this idea that all these people have in their heads, told to them by the colleges and universities, and all the marketing material that they get when they get their degree, or when they're being
Yeah.
advertised to come to that university. So that makes it tough too. So whereas you probably could find some great co-op students, and find the good ones and find the new grads and teach them, it's almost too expensive to bring them on for the investment that it takes of your training to get them up to speed.
And that is the challenge I know that a lot of designers face, because they don't want to have to pay for intermediate or senior level help. And so they're hiring it right out of school. But then because that person doesn't learn in school the practical applications that they need for being inside a company, specifically with designers. I mean, you learn how to design, you learn how to do AutoCAD, but you're not learning how to call and place a CFA for fabric. You're not learning, you don't know where to drive to go pick up samples. You don't understand like how to use Asana inside your design firm, and like there's a lot of tasks that you need to teach. And so I know from talking to designers, that can be so frustrating. Here's this new person who's come on my team. I am paying them $60,000, and yet they're not where I would expect them to be at $60,000. And actually, it does a disservice to the employee and to the employer, because the employee is like, okay, this is great. But then they're not able to meet their employer's expectations. And then the employer at some point is like, I can't afford this person. They're not as good as I thought they were. And then they have to let them go. And it's, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see in the next 6 to 8 months how things kind of maybe level out a little. It is changing. I do feel it changing. It is something that I don't want designers listening today, though, to be afraid to hire. I think the purposes of today's conversation is really like, get your ducks in a row, get educated, get the information that you need, but also like you need to spot the right hire. Find someone who is the right fit for you and your company. Like, take the time, like you said, you don't have to hire the first person who comes through your door. The challenge is that it's time consuming. It's time consuming to find the right person.
And I think we got to know, like I said before, you don't need to be either 0 hours or 40 hours. There's in-betweens, there's ways to be creative, even in an employment relationship, that you can bring on people in a way that's safe for your business. It might take a little bit more time to find that right person, but it gives you confidence knowing that you have somebody in place and that you can still make payroll. The piece of that too, though, is as small businesses, we tend to wait too long to make that hire. So by
Yes.
the time we get there, because let's be honest, it's scary to bring somebody on in your business, to be the face. When I bring on new business partners, they're client facing. They represent my business. Like, that's a scary endeavor. And it's the same for a lot of your teams as well. And I think we wait too long because, oh, how do I make the job description? Oh, what should go in it? Like, where do I even post this? How much should I be hiring? Great. Now I've got resumes, but like, what do I ask them when they're in an interview? All of these things take up mental space. And so we just push it off because there's fires that we need to take care of. And so we wait too long to hire, and then we feel panicky.
Totally.
So we started a recruitment process in September for a hire that we don't really need till January, because we wanted to make sure we had the right amount of time. We made sure that people knew that this was like not a new thing. And as opposed to saying, okay, we know we need somebody in January, we'll start in November. So this way we have all our ducks in a row. Now, what happens in January if I don't actually need them till February? We pivot, we figure it out. But it's better to have all of those pieces in place prior to. And again, this one isn't even a full-time. This is just a part-time person that we need for January.
It's what they say, right? They, whoever they are, says hire slow and fire fast. That's a great example of hiring slow. My goodness, to have that sort of foresight and planning capabilities. I think all of us would love to be there, Laura. I love that. Such a role model. All right, we've come to our time today. But before we end our conversation, I always love for our guests to share a last nugget of wisdom with our listeners today. What have you got for us?
So this isn't something that's been playing on my heart lately. And I've talked to a few people in the industry, and I think, maybe Anna from Frozen said it best, is do the next right thing. Sometimes I think we have these big audacious goals and we overwhelm ourselves without just saying, you know what, this is my sphere of influence right now. This is who I'm going to be a part of. I'm not trying to change the world today or tomorrow. I'm going to influence the people in my circle. I'm going to do the next right thing for my business. Yeah, I might have some big audacious goals, but today is the one thing that I'm going to move my business forward is doing A. And I think we got to take a bit of pressure off of ourselves. I think right now we're all trying to solve world peace and all these things. And it's a mental and emotional load that we're all carrying. And we just need to do the next right thing and influence the people in our circle.
Ugh, I love that. Obviously, you must have a daughter.
I do.
to pull a reference from Disney's Frozen movie. So for those of you who are listening, you're like, who is Anna and what is Frozen? Just go online and look it up. I love that.
Frozen karaoke in our car.
There's a song. My daughter has like a toy that's the only line it says.
Yeah.
And it's in Anna's voice and she's singing it. The next right thing. Oh my God.
Everybody will have this in their head. Yeah. It will be stuck there. It's been a week long of playing this kind of thing in my head as I think about it, as I watch friends and family just, going through the things that they're going through. I was like, you know what? We have a sphere of influence. Let's use those people and not worry till that expands.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Laura, for all of your wisdom and all of your tips today. Definitely some mind-blowing moments for me. I scribbled a bunch of notes. I can't wait to hear what designers think of this episode. Before we end our time together, can you let everyone know where they can find and follow you?
Yeah. So essentialhr.ca is the website. And if you go to that front page, there's all kinds of downloads you can grab, but you can also find me at LinkedIn and Instagram. Essentialhr.ca is the handle on Instagram. We like to keep it light. We like to keep it funny. A lot of memes, a lot of GIFs on there. If there's an office GIF that we haven't used, please let me know, because most of them are on our feed. And we give some tidbits and some downloads on there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We will definitely have you back on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. It was great.
All right. So I hope that was as informative for you as it was for me. And I hope it didn't scare you. It's so interesting. Actually, Laura and I stayed on after we hit stop recording on the podcast. We stayed on for like another 40 minutes just conversing and talking about the industry, talking about what's happening in the world right now. And it's just such a joy to talk to someone who fully gets what we're going through, who really understands what it is to be a small business owner because she is one herself. This isn't like you're working with this giant conglomerate or this big company that services massive firms on retainer. Yeah, she has retainer clients, but she gets what it is to be a small business, and they are there to meet you and help you with your contracts, with your onboarding, with the termination, like all of the things. My biggest sort of takeaway was the idea of really a subcontractor, the idea that they can and should outsource if they want to. Like, so many ahas in this podcast. I would love to know from you guys, what were the ahas that you had listening to this episode? Let's start a conversation about HR, the thing that people are afraid to talk about, but everybody needs to know about. Let me know. And of course, if there's something that we didn't touch on that you think would be useful to have Laura come back to the podcast to talk about, let me know too. That's it, guys. I hope you're having a really great day, and I'll see you soon.